when I was in college, I worked at a pretty high-end restaurant. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called Chili's. No big deal. Um, and one of the best lessons I learned from my time at Chili's, and there are some good ones, was the ability to identify who the customer needed me to be in like the first 5 seconds, right? Is this a family that wants me to entertain the kids? Is it a bunch of buddies that are, want, upgrades on steak or extra nachos or whatever? Or is it, ladies that just want me to keep the iced teas refilled and keep it moving? Like, don't let us talk. We don't need you to be here. And I think in any interaction, right, you're looking at these people, the person that's on the other side of the table for me is either high velocity, right? Like they want to move quickly. They know what they want. Here we go. Or they're high value, right? They want the conversation, the bigger discussion about what the possibilities are. And I think if you try and approach a high value person with high velocity, it creates tension. If you try and sell high value to a high velocity person, it creates tension. And so really being able to understand who I'm talking to is a huge deal.
Couldn't agree more.
Sometimes I learn things from you. It's rare, but it happens.
I'm here to help. Mr.
Puntastic.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on the pod, Dan. We really appreciate you hanging out. And what we'd love to do, though, is just give you an opportunity to talk just a little bit about your business, what you're up to. I've known you for a few years now, and I'm excited for you to meet Paul. This is the first time you guys are chatting. So tell us a little bit about your business, where you're at, and what you got going on.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I'm the lead nutritionist and CEO at Revitalize Weight Loss and Wellness. And we help people lose weight and keep it off. So, our big thing is that we feel like this industry in general profits from people's failure, right? You always have to come back to the magic pill or the bars and shakes or whatever the thing is. And we're really focused on measurable metabolic repair and empowerment to know exactly what foods and rhythms work best for your body to be able to keep that weight off for the long haul.
Dude, how many times have you said that little elevator pitch right there? That was great.
Enough times. I've sat with, I think I was calculating the other day just for kicks. I think I've sat with over 10,000 kind of new member enrollments.
Wow.
So, or close to it.
That's a lot.
And when we're recording this in December 3rd for our listeners, but are you do you guys feel like a new year push, like the New Year's resolution? Is that like a huge thing for you guys, or do you try?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's actually kind of funny because everybody's like, January must be gangbusters, and it's always better than the holidays, obviously. But February, March tend to be bigger months, I think, because people are kind of like DIYing it. I'm going to do it myself. And then, by the time February hits, 90% of us have given up on our resolutions and are like, all right, I need some accountability and help, or I need a little bit of guidance here.
And they white knuckled it for a month and got tired of time to bring in the big guns. Got it.
Now you wrote a book with your father-in-law, right? This guy right here, Fear No Food. Give us like the quick version of this. Tell me the synopsis.
Yeah. So it really is an extension of the work we've already been doing. We got published in October of 21, hit a few bestseller lists, which we were pumped about on Amazon. But, I think a lot of folks will launch a book and then build a business off of that. We kind of did it the other way around, where we already have successful practices doing this. And we were like, hey, how do we get our pillars of our approach out to more people, even if they're maybe not ready to jump in with us full bore? We feel like there's a lot that can be learned and taken away. And there's a lot of great books out there. Frankly, a lot of them are super text heavy and boring and sciencey. And we tried to really make it an easy and fun read. So that was kind of the premise of the book there.
Obviously, this is a massive, massive industry. There's so-called experts popping up all over the place. I've watched a lot of their YouTube videos. And how do you stand out in a field of just absolute chaos? It feels like the Wild West. No one is, I'm sure someone is, but it feels like no one's regulating this. You can say anything, here's the yogurt diet. All you're going to do all day is eat just tons and tons of yogurt. And this is how do you stand out and, have some sanity in the midst of craziness?
Yeah. I actually just wrote an email to, we have an email list of about 30,000 people that get my emails, and we had an email that that went out on like the cotton ball diet, which of course is like on one very, extreme part of the spectrum, but you basically just soak cotton balls in like juice and just eat that to feel full, but to have like, and I'm just like, oh gosh, can't believe this is a real thing.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, there is a lot of noise. I think for us, it's like the proof is in the pudding. We worked with over 11,000 people. We've got a 95% success rate, which we benchmark, measure, and track as much as we possibly can. Our philosophy really is, how do we build long-term relationships, and how do we, we joke, we're like, let's try to work ourselves out of a job. Like one of the best times we celebrate is when somebody calls and say, hey, like I'm going to terminate my membership. And, our question is like, okay, why? And, 9 times out of 10, it's like, feel empowered. My body's staying stable. I'm keeping this 30, 40 pounds off. And I'll come back if ever I need another intervention. Those are the happy times we kind of push out of the nest and say, you're equipped metabolically, you're equipped with the empowerment to know kind of what's best for you. And we trust that that's going to just create this flywheel of referrals, which it has.
Yeah. Fly, baby bird, fly.
That's right.
I love the idea that, like, there's that scene in Elf where Buddy the elf is scarfing down cotton balls. I didn't realize this was a real diet. You dip it in juice and
that's the elf diet, I guess we should call it.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
What we've found is that sustained results and empowerment really kind of sits in the middle of having a customized whole food anti-inflammatory nutrition plan, understanding what supplements are best for you, and then some level of accountability and coaching. When those 3 things are in place is where we see people really shine.
I think you were nearing rolling out like the remote option. So like you used to have to go and do check-ins at the office, but now people can do it from wherever, right?
Yeah. And that, COVID really forced our hand on that a little bit. It's just to be able to figure out how can we get this technology to people. And then just recently we've launched an app and a smart scale so that, anything that you would be doing here in our office, standing on one of our clinical scales to get your internal biometrics, you have in your home every day. And then all of that data is going right into the app. We have a dashboard on each person where we're monitoring that daily to make sure your hydration levels are where they need to be, et cetera. What's also beautiful about our new app is that if you wear an Oura Ring or have a Fitbit or a Garmin watch or smart devices, you can layer that and sync that right into the app as well. So we can really start to validate health outcomes and start to show you trends that, like, hey, every time you're getting over 7,000 steps, your HRV is going up, your ability to navigate stress, or your recoveries are going up, or your weight is going down. And so you can start layering these things together to give you a fuller picture of your health and how your decisions from a nutrition and lifestyle standpoint are impacting not just the weight, but also your internal health metrics.
That's awesome.
One of the things that I am sort of fascinated by just in life in general is the idea of sort of focusing in on what you can control and kind of eliminating the rest, right? Leaving the rest up to that's outside of my control. So it's not something I'm going to work up. One of the quotes I heard somewhere was around food and sort of diet and all that stuff. And it was like your ability to not cheat on your diet, to not overindulge, to, whatever is directly tied to your relationship with suffering. Right. And suffering is not something we love to talk about a ton, but the idea of like choosing in the moment something that is uncomfortable, or choosing, to not indulge and take that like pleasure in the moment, so that you can trade it in for sort of the long-term sustained pleasure results. Is that a part of the conversation you have with people about that? Like, how much of it is mindset, when you're talking through this journey with people?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it's mindset, right? And I think when we talk about empowerment, like that really is like, can you stack some wins where you can prove to yourself that, like, hey, I control food and what I put in my body, not the other way around. Because I've been in those situations where I feel like I can't even control myself. Like, I have to have that donut. I have to have this thing. But once you've proven to yourself that's like, okay, you don't own me. Like, I can give myself permission to indulge in this, or I can give myself permission to not indulge. I think about that with my relationship with alcohol. Like, I've not had alcohol in quite a long time, multiple years at this point. I realized there was a time where I needed to exercise my no muscle because I was just over exercising my yes muscle and I was getting imbalanced. And so I do think that is, but I also think there's like in our program, we have like a pretty robust like program journal that, and I probably won't be able to pull it up right here, but I had this Thomas Chalmers quote, who was a pastor and a philosopher, and he basically talks about the power of a greater affection, and he's talking about it in the spiritual realm, but I think it can also be, one of the things we keep in front of our members too is like, why are you doing this? Like on my first visit, you talked about wanting to, be around for your kid who has special needs and be healthy for them, or you want to be around for your grandkids' weddings, or I want to be able to get back on the ski lift and go bomb the hills and do the double blacks like I used to, but I can't because I'm carrying around an extra 60 pounds. When you keep that greater affection at forefront, choosing health and choosing healthier options becomes a lot easier. And then your affections for those things are maybe less healthy starts to diminish. And that's ultimately what we want. Or I don't know, I'm sure you guys are familiar with Jocko. He's kind of a big podcast. He talks about like discipline equals freedom. And it's like, yeah, there is short-term suffering to forge discipline, but ultimately you start to really reap the benefits of like having that freedom to be able to move your body the way you want to, or the flexibility or the energy or these things. And that's what I love about our app and tracking some of these metrics, or even other wearables, whether that's just this, or like I'm sure you've seen like levels or these constant glucose monitors that people are wearing on the back of their arms. The more we can kind of shorten that understanding of my decisions now in the moment and how it impacts my internal biochemistry, and the more I can visualize that, I think the more solidifying those healthy choices become. I used to wear a Whoop band. Are you guys familiar with the Whoop band?
Yeah.
It's like a fancy Fitbit that's kind of made for CrossFit type guys, right?
Fun to say also.
Yeah. But that was a huge kind of an affirming reason why I gave up alcohol. It felt like every time I would drink, even if it was in appropriate amounts, like my sleep scores would go down the next day, my recovery metrics would go down the next day. And so I'm visualizing the impact of these less than healthy options and be able to see that. And I think that just reinforced my conviction around that stuff.
So by the way, sorry, Mike, I keep talking over you because I'm fascinated by this, but how do you, this is your life's work, right? You've made this, this is obviously a passion of yours, but how do you stop from going, overboard? And what I mean by that is like, cause I've done a lot of like the sleep tracking stuff, and I, downloaded an app that records snippets of you snoring, and I'm like the next day listening back and like, oh, this is a good run of, of no snoring, good breathing. And then like you have these moments where what was happening at 2:43, where it's just like sawn logs, and you can like really obsess about every moment and sort of forget to live. Like how do you sort of navigate that?
There's a reason I don't wear the Whoop band anymore. My chest is like, I felt like I learned what I needed to learn, and I was getting too sucked into like, over optimizing, and then you're just not living. And that's where it's like too much discipline creates prison, not freedom, right? Where it's like, dude, freaking eat a piece of cake. Like, come on.
That's been on 3 years, but anyway.
Yeah. I think there's a name for that, and I forget what it is, where it's like you have too many inputs and you're just obsessing over this stuff. And I think it's kind of know thyself, right? To the extent that it's helpful, great. But if you're finding yourself just obsessing over these things, back to things like what can you control? And once you kind of got your learnings and you're feeling good, they've done some interesting studies with like sleep too, where it's like, our take on customized nutrition, I kind of feel the same way about sleep. Like the general recommendation is 8 hours. And I would say that's, 80% of us should be shooting for 7 to 8 hours. But everybody's bodies are different based on what you're learning, what you're going through, what stage of life you're in. And they found, in some of these studies where they'll do these sleep studies and tell you, Paul, that you got a great night's sleep, even though you only had 4 hours. And Micah, they tell you that you had terrible sleep, but you had full 8 hours, and Paul, you had 4 hours, but they told you that you had great sleep. And the way you would move through the day would be based on just what you thought you got.
Yeah.
Even though it was completely different than what you actually got. And so I think that's where like the over tracking can actually be hurtful, where it's like, I'm dragging the rest of the day because my sleep score was down. But had I not known that my sleep score was down, would I have really been acting all like fatigued? Probably not. So placebo is a real thing, but you can definitely take it overboard.
They should have a 24-hour delay on the results. So you move through the day, then you can see the results and try to see, oh, wow, I actually, it didn't affect me in that way or whatever.
I've seen some apps where it's like, it'll track everything. It'll do all of that stuff, but then it will ask you to rate how you feel. Right. And but the scale was like emojis. And so it was like a really angry emoji and then like a happy emoji. And I'm just like, I remember looking at this and thinking, well, if I say it's like the moderately happy emoji, which I guess was like the emoji with like a half smile versus the pumped emoji, am I like, is my head going to explode? Like there's so much sort of energy around this stuff. That's like, if you don't get 8 hours of sleep, it's basically like you're driving drunk and you're going to die. And it's like, well, okay,
Totally.
Probably is not that extreme, but certainly important.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have another question for you. Well, the question is around Ozempic. It's sort of like I think a lot of people are using it as the magic wand right now. And there's maybe a good use case for it and then like an abuse of it. And then I'm just curious about your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly a hot button issue, and there's billions of dollars going into the PR machine with these medications. In short, I think it's a tool. It's certainly not the full solution. In most cases, any good practitioners, and if you look at the studies, it's like this needs to be taken in conjunction with healthy lifestyle changes and diet modifications. My philosophy is that why not start with the healthy lifestyle changes and the diet modifications? And then if you need the medicated intervention, we can explore that. The majority of the time, you don't need that medicated intervention if you're doing the other stuff. And I think the negatives aren't getting enough airtime. I mean, we're seeing it all the time. Half the people we sit with now have either tried it or are currently on it and are experiencing terrible side effects: stomach paralysis, kidney stones, gallstones, thyroid issues, anemia, severe muscle loss. And unfortunately, I think we're going to see a big fallout of that. And I think, I asked my own doctor just to kind of test him, if you will, and be like, hey, how long does somebody need to stay on that? And they're like, well, maybe a couple months. And I'm like, on the box, it says you need to take this for life. And the studies show that if you come off of it, you're going to put the weight back on. And we're seeing that in droves right now. And I think one of the more alarming short-term side effects that we're seeing, and if you can look at some of the studies and even some of the other talking head doctors on YouTube, and that's like the amount of muscle people are losing is insane. It's like 50 to 75% of the weight you're losing is muscle mass. So you're fundamentally getting fatter. Like your body fat percentage is going up, even though you're losing pounds on the scale. And so, we're seeing the same results or better in a shorter time frame with whole food nutrition and guided programs. I think the use cases for it are pretty narrow, or what they should be used for is pretty narrow. In most cases, folks who are using it are probably not the ideal candidates in my professional opinion. Not to mention, there's ways to naturally increase your GLP-1 hormone, which is what these drugs are doing. You can do that naturally. And so why not try to do that naturally? If you're looking for appetite suppression, or you feel like that your hormones are out of balance and you're always hungry or things like that, or you're never satiated, there are things you can do to, through removing inflammation, focusing on gut health, even some supplements that can help naturally increase that GLP-1 hormone without all of these terrible digestive side effects and other potentially more serious side effects.
All right. So I have a question about inflammation. Okay. So I get these ads all the time about grounding. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I have ordered a grounding bed sheet.
Should you explain grounding, Micah, to our listeners who are not familiar?
Well, I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but the idea is that there's a charge to your body. There's a sort of electric charge. And by grounding, meaning your bare feet, basically, normally would be touching the earth, not cement, not the soles of your shoes, something, but not the inside of your house, but grass or dirt. And through doing that, it sort of equalizes or neutralizes your charge, I guess is the best way I can put it. And it impacts your inflammation in your body. That's this in my simple man's way of explaining. That's where I got it. And I'm always charged. I'm shocking things all the time. Like blue sparks are coming off my skin. So we have jokes about it in my house. Like I can't get out of the car without holding on to the metal frame because I will shock something. So I'm hoping that this will maybe neutralize some of that and also decrease inflammation for me and my wife. So the bed sheet basically plugs into the grounding, the third prong of your outlet, and sort of tries to mimic that same thing that would happen if you went to the beach and put your feet in the sand for a couple hours. Give me your thoughts.
I like it. But, I know the critics are going to say, well, it hasn't been scientifically validated. And I think that's one of the the downfalls of our scientific community, that if it isn't, a double blind peer reviewed study, that it has no validity. And I think that that's not necessarily a reason to throw something out. Yeah. I mean, I think it stands to reason, like we were created to be, on this earth, touching dirt and swimming in the ocean and rivers and things like that. And we're not doing enough of that. And we used to actually use that as like if you're stuck and you're plateaued and we're doing all the other interventions, grounding was like one of our plateau burgers. We kind of pulled it out because it feels a little woo-woo. But whether it's actually because the negative ions charge of the earth is, interacting with your body's biochemistry. I think there are some interesting things. I've listened to a 3-hour podcast on this and kind of got lost in the sauce a little bit, but they made a pretty compelling case. I also know that like in Japan, they, doctors will prescribe like forest bathing, which is like go walk in nature, like go outside. And I think there's maybe some just de-stressing effects of actually grounding, right? Swimming in the ocean, putting your feet in sand. And then there's placebo potentially of these grounding mats. But I follow the UFC a little bit, and a lot of these fighters, we're on the nutrition team of the Phoenix Suns, and so those guys are always on those in the locker room. So I think there's something to it.
Wasn't there something too? When you talk about walking in the forest, some of this is like just vitamin D, right? Like having sunshine on your face and getting outside of the house. The kids these days are saying, touch grass, it's not bad advice, right?
Yeah, totally.
Now you mentioned, Dan, the idea that some of these things are a little woo-woo, which thank you for that. I love that phrase and will say that for the rest of my life. I'm not going to ask you to like point out the people that are crackpots and charlatans on the internet, but are there any people that you've seen online that you're like, okay, he or she is kind of onto something, or this is, potentially good advice? Like what you just said about grounding sort of I heard, I think it's Dr. Huberman talk about grounding and sort of the, is it completely being in the ground, or is it some of these other things? But so I don't know, are there people that you're looking at that you're like, okay, this person is not woo-woo?
Yeah, I mean, the one person that comes to mind is Casey Means. She's an MD who started Levels Health. Her brother, Callie, wrote a book called Good Energy. I know Callie, we partnered with his company called TrueMed, which allows people to use their HSA, FSA dollars for services like ours, but saunas, gym memberships, et cetera. And I think she brings up oftentimes when she goes on podcasts and things like that, just how she's really been ousted in many ways in the medical community for this exact reason. It's like, oh, well, there isn't enough research, so we can't say that eating less sugar is actually going to improve inflammatory markers or help reverse some of these chronic obesity illnesses that we have in our country. And I think anybody with a brain can say like, okay, clearly our food system's broken. The food we're eating is less than optimal, and we have mass metabolic dysfunction across the board here in the States. And so I think, she'll get labeled as woo-woo or pseudoscience when it's just like eating an anti-inflammatory diet and removing things that are going to just spike your blood sugar and focusing on holistic health is actually the best medicine that we all have access to. And we don't have to necessarily just buy into big pharma's like, hey, just take a pill for that or opt for that.
So Dan, we were in Phoenix together a little bit ago. Before that, we were in Simi Valley at a couple of events, but something came up when we were together, and it was kind of a travel hack for you. And I heard somebody else mention it, and I just wanted you to talk about for a minute your sort of obsession of getting into places that normally are closed doors and seeing if you can just weasel your way into the airport lounge that is close to you or whatever it is. Tell me a story or two about Dan getting his way, getting past, security or the closed door. Tell me about that.
Yeah, there was once upon a time I was a really poor missionary living in the Dominican Republic. I'm still a missionary, but I was doing full-time ministry in the DR. And so I travel a lot back to the States to meet with donors and things like that for our nonprofit. And I got a taste. You get a little taste for the club life. You never want to go back to Gen Pop. And so anytime I'd be at like an airport, I would, try to figure out, is there a way that I can kind of talk my way into getting into one of these clubs? And so I think it started because a friend of mine who you met, Austin, Micah, we went to his house, and we can unpack your trauma from going there on the pod or off the pod if you'd like. Hey, you're traveling a ton. I've got this American Airlines City card. Let me just add you as a child card underneath that. Don't use a card, but it'll get you into all of these clubs whenever you travel. And it worked famously until it didn't. And then I had to find out ways to like, oh, I'm not sure why the card's not working, or like, oh, this is the Delta Lounge. Oh, there's not an American Lounge. Well, here's my situation. And I don't know, you just really try to have to figure out, how do I connect with this person and elicit some, and it sounds super manipulative, but like, how do I elicit some empathy to see if like they would let you into the club, or like the minute suites, there it's like, can I endear myself? Can I be winsome with this person and get, I get a free half hour. Can I get that extended to like an hour and a half or 2 hours by just asking questions and connecting with them? It's like, oh, do you have availability afterwards? Does anybody book the room after? What is it to add on? Oh, we don't really do that. Okay. And then you just like, if you can sit with the silence, most people are very uncomfortable with silence. So Paul, that from being in sales, it's like whoever can like sit longest after like the dollar figure comes out, wins that negotiation. Right. And so it's like, oh, so there's nobody booked after. What does it cost to upgrade? Oh, we don't really do upgrades. And then inevitably, but let me see what I can do. There's just this, I don't know. So
just
I think
that little,
like
little thing. This has become a new hobby of mine. I saw it or heard it on a podcast. Someone was like, the magic phrase is, what are the chances? Right. And so every hotel, every airline, every flight, if I'm traveling for work or something, I'm going up and just sort of having a conversation, making a connection. How's your day going? And say, hey, what are the chances that I could find my way into first class? What are the chances you could upgrade our room here? And the worst they can say is no, right?
Yeah. And even just saying like, hey, is there like a nice guy discount I could get? And most of the time people are like, yeah, sure. And so I think it's a little way to like, challenge yourself to be winsome. I'm not the only person who's done it. I've seen stuff on the socials where people are like, just ask for a discount on their coffee or like different things like that can kind of be a fun game. And you'd be surprised what people, my wife was at like a big home show type, junk in the trunk type antiquing place. And she went with my cousin and got back. She's like, Danae's a magician. Like she not only got like this thing for cheap, they threw in this other thing when she asked, and the boys brought it to the car and like packed the car because she asked. She's like, I never would have thought to ask. I would have been like trying to struggle getting this big thing into the car. And it's like, sometimes you just have to ask.
I love that you called it junk in the trunk.
I think that's the name of it. I also think one other hack that I learned from, what's the Leonardo DiCaprio movie that was based on a book where he was like a con man? Catch Me If You Can. He talks about how he at one point noticed he was sitting in an airport, kind of not knowing where to go, what to do. And he noticed that he was broke. And every night they would take the deposits to this bank and put it into this slot, all the like vendors within the airport. And so he just went and rented like a cop uniform, or had one because he was a con man, and just stood there, put a sign over the thing saying deposit box broken, leave with guard. And for a night, he collected like $1,000 or $2,000 or something like that by just like what he wore. And so like the places I've gotten into wearing my blue suit, like I were partners with the Phoenix Suns before they did the full remodel of the stadium. I put my Suns pin on my lapel on my jacket. With all of the other reps and the kind of C-level guys wore blue suits or black suits, and they all had the pin, and I put my pin on. And I wasn't trying to get in different ways, but I'm like, hey, I think there's a shortcut to get to my seats through here. Next thing I know, I'm like by the locker rooms, like seeing players. I'm like, I'm not supposed to be here, but they just let me walk right through, even though I didn't have credentials, because I just looked the part.
It's so funny. I mean, I work with frontline salespeople, and a lot of them are frustrated that they're not getting the results they want, that they're not getting referrals, or they're, whatever the case may be. And 9 times out of 10, I feel like it is just that they're not asking, right? Or they're just, I always tell people, and this is the delicate balance, right? Like, I think being able to sit down across from someone and getting them to do what you want them to do is a superpower. Now, some people do that by being a scumbag. I like to do that by, creating win-win opportunities and doing what's best for them. But there's something so I don't know, exciting and fun about just those interactions and chat. And I love the phrase you use, just challenging yourself to be winsome, challenging yourself to sort of win somebody over, and get them onto your side. I think, we don't do that enough. And I think the people that do, I want to be around that guy. Like those are the fun to hang out with.
Totally. Well, and I think it comes back to leadership. Like our mutual friend, Mike and I, our friend, Zach Clark, who's a great mentor of mine, he talks about, we're leading somebody to a buying decision, and that buying decision might be a no, and that's fine, but are we leading them? And at least in our case, like people are already coming to us saying like, I don't have all the answers and I need help. And so if we just kind of put too many things in front of them or just kind of let them, we really need to say like, this is what I think the best course of action that's going to knock it out of the park for you is. And people want to be led. I don't know, this sounds weird, but they want to be told what to do. I see that with my staff. I see that with myself in different areas where it's like, dude, just like, I don't want us to make this choice. Like I'm coming to you, I'm ready to, buy this thing. Just like, what option is best for me? Tell me, what do I need to do? Like, well, you could buy this. And I was like, hey, yeah, I go to a naturopath. He's like, well, this supplement might be good. I'm like, just tell me what I need to buy. Like, I don't know. You're the expert. Yeah. And so I think it comes down to leadership and being clear and clearly communicating, and of course, being winsome to win people over.
Yeah, I think so many people, they sign up for a sales role, right? And then they just don't like being a salesperson. And I'm like, well, no one likes being a salesperson. People don't like talking to salespeople. There's a guard that immediately goes up because you're trying to, get one over on me, or, whatever the preconceived notion we have about salespeople. But being a consultant, that's a whole different, that's me helping you see what's around the corner, right? And if in my world, right, I want my people to work with a network of accountants and bankers. And so if I can connect the dots, if I can be a rainmaker, if I can make those introductions with a CPA who will help you guide your business and do all of these things, I'm going to connect you with 3 incredible people that I work with. They're like, absolutely. Thank you so much. It's a different game.
Are you guys seeing a shift in kind of consumer behavior over the last couple of years with regard to the appetite to have that discovery call or have that meeting, and people wanting to just do all the research on their own and just like click to buy now?
Yeah, there's been a huge move in our movement in our world of a fix for right now, but they're not, Micah and I have used a phrase forever where people that are working in the business, but not on the business, right? So we're thinking about our day to day, we're thinking about the right now, and I got to meet this need or plug this hole. If I took a step back and, took a 30,000 foot view, I would see, okay, in the next year or two, this is going to be an issue. So do I have a system or a process that's going to put me where I want to be in a year or two? And if you can be that person that's like, well, I know what's keeping you up at night, but here's what should be keeping you up at night. This is what you should be thinking about. Now you're invaluable. So that's the shift that we've seen.
Yeah. For me, I see the people who are not really serious about getting help, because in my world, it's administrative help, remote administrative help. So if they're not serious about it, they're just going to ask like, okay, what's the price? And we're not going to have a conversation. Like, okay, you can have the price, but we need to talk, because I don't know if we're the right solution for you yet. We need to talk about this. So I kind of like say, you can look at the price or whatever. I can give you resources, but like, let's have a conversation, because we need to figure out if this is a good fit or not. So the culture might be going toward that short-term buy now, but I think in what I'm doing, it's not a product, it's a service. And so it's a little bit harder to do that.
Yeah. I think we've seen that shift in, like, it used to be maybe 50% marketing, 50% sales, where there was like kind of a no-brainer, like I'll sign up for a consultation to learn a little bit more, or to get all the details, or to hear the specific price for me. And I think it's kind of like 90-10 now, where it's like I feel like we've been forced to really think about, what does our web presence look like? Where can people find us and understand more, especially in our industry where there are so many bad actors and people are very skeptical, and frankly should be very skeptical. How can we, live this value of transparency in the public with regard to our programs, our pricing, the different options, and tell our story and be where people are trying to find out more and get more testimonials up, et cetera, so that people can do their research, so that when they are saying like, yeah, I'm ready to book an appointment, they've done that research and then they're ready to kind of make that next move.
Typically for me, when people come to me, they come to me from referral mostly. And so they've already talked to somebody. They've already heard somebody's story. They've watched a couple of YouTube videos or interviews or whatever. And then we can have a real productive conversation from there. But yeah. The cold outreach, like, if I'm talking to somebody who has no idea what we do, has no connection to anybody we work with, it's a lot longer of a timeline to actually have a real conversation. I love referrals from our clients. It's like the best thing ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the best.
When I was in college, I worked at a pretty high-end restaurant. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called Chili's. No big deal. And one of the best lessons I learned from my time at Chili's was the ability to identify who the customer needed me to be in the first 5 seconds, right? Is this a family that wants me to entertain the kids? Is it a bunch of buddies that are, want, upgrades on steak or extra nachos or whatever? Or is it, ladies that just want me to keep the iced teas refilled and keep it moving? Like, don't let us talk. We don't need you to be here. And I think in any interaction, right, you're looking at these people, the person that's on the other side of the table for me is either high velocity, right? Like they want to move quickly. They know what they want. Here we go. Or they're high value, right? They want the conversation, the bigger discussion about what the possibilities are. And I think if you try and approach a high value person with high velocity, it creates tension. If you try and sell high value to a high velocity person, it creates tension. And so really being able to understand who I'm talking to is a huge deal.
Totally.
That's really smart.
Couldn't agree more.
Sometimes I learn things from you. It's rare, but it happens.
I'm here to help.
Well, all right. We are coming up on our time here pretty soon, but I want to make sure that we get to the goods. And the goods for us is in a little segment we call Pun and Done. I love it. All right. Yeah.
It maybe goes on longer than you think. Every time you hit it.
It goes on. It goes on. It goes on. I faded out. So, Dan, we love to share dad jokes, puns, things that would maybe make our kids groan, but each other at least chuckle. So have you brought anything to the table for that today?
Well, I'm a newer dad, so I've got a 2.5-year-old. So the dad jokes I'm still fresh in my game. I don't have a ton on my top shelf, I don't think, but I really wanted to make a chemistry joke, but I didn't get a good reaction.
Well done.
Nice.
A lot of people
I know
do this the wrong way. They come in and they try and make it, a big production. You just slid it in there natural. I think that was cool as ice. I like that.
One section that you guys in your prompts had kind of talked about was like what we had learned from our wives. And, I told my wife she should really embrace her mistakes. And then she just gave me a hug.
Well done.
That is so good.
Well, you were way of the tech issues. We could just hear you clacking away at your keyboard. I have a keyboard technology one. I told a joke about a broken keyboard, but it didn't get a good return.
Well done. I like it. Yeah, I got a couple. So this is a little bit more dad jokey than punny, but why did the computer get a cold?
Something about a virus.
Because it left its windows open.
Oh,
nice. That's a good one.
That's great because it also is a little dig at Windows computers.
It's all love from me. No shots at Microsoft. But Dan, you said you are a new dad. How old is your child?
I have a 2.5-year-old daughter and a 7-month-old daughter.
All right. Well, this one's going to be right up your alley. So where do you take someone who's been injured in a peekaboo accident?
Where?
ICU.
Nice. Good one.
Thank you. I've got a couple more, Micah, but you can rattle off some.
Yeah, me too, Micah, but it's your turn. We don't want to, we
Hey.
want to sprinkle in some of yours.
I appreciate the invitation to be in the mix here. Paul's got his guitars there in the back of them. He's in a country band. It's called Dakota Crossing for anybody excited to check that out. And recently recording some originals, right?
Yes.
So that's been fun. But I wonder, does music ever make you wonder? Because it sure made Stevie wonder.
No. I hate you so much.
I wish.
Thank you.
We have a saying in our family, the LeMoines take the stairs. So if you ever see us at like an airport, we're always lugging stuff upstairs instead of taking the escalator when we can. But I don't really trust stairs because they're always up to something.
You're taking steps to avoid them.
I was just about to slip that joke in about my fear of elevators. Well done, Micah.
Yeah. I am famously not flexible, never been able to touch my toes. I think it came out the womb, not being able to touch I'm just so famously inflexible. And so I wanted to learn how to do the splits. So I asked a gym instructor, can you teach me how to do the splits? And he said, how flexible are you? And I said, well, I can't really make Tuesdays. I love just the nod, just oh my gosh, that was terrible.
Well done.
That's the groan.
Yeah, that's awesome. My son asked me the other day if I could explain to him what a solar eclipse is. No, son.
Parallel lines have so much in common. It's a shame that they'll never meet. So true.
Never intersect. Won't happen. All right, I got one more. Why did the duck end up in jail?
I don't know.
He was selling quack.
No, yeah. Selling quack.
Stupid. Good.
Dan, do you have any more?
That's all I got. I'm out. Fresh out.
All right. Well, my last one is more just a statement. You got to hand it to short people. Because they can't reach it themselves.
I feel like that one needs more context. More context. But Dan, thanks for being with us. It's been awesome. You've actually provided a lot of value for people, which is not normal for this podcast.
You said that with a question mark.
More
Didn't
value?
bring value? More value?
He brought that. That's weird. It's not even a value podcast. So thanks for doing that. Really elevated the status of this thing. And now we have something we have to shoot for now. So,
well, Dan, thanks so much for being with us. Everybody should go check out the book, Fear No Food. And where can they find you online?
You can find us at revitalizeweightloss.com. And I think we're, revitalize.weightloss on Instagram.
And join revitalize.com as well, because that's in your name.
Yeah, either way. Goes all the same place. Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Thanks for being here.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.